Guys, we talked about the trade deadline coming up next week, just 1 week from when we are recording this podcast right now. So I'm sure general managers are very, very busy. Dom, you talked about it last night on the air, how challenging this year is for general managers. I mean, there's no question between all the added elements off the ice they have to deal with. They've got to deal with border restrictions with Canada, making a trade with those teams. There's just so much to look at. But when you look at the teams, all of that aside, that need to make a trade the most, who are you looking at, Dom, right off the bat?
To me, it's Boston. They've had a good start to the season. They were right up at the top, and then last month or so they've just been up and down, and mostly down, to be honest. They've struggled to score goals when you get outside the top line. Sharp, you mentioned earlier they need Chara back. You mentioned that KT, that they lost Torrey, and Matt Grzelcyk and Charlie McAvoy are outstanding defensemen, but they're different players than Torrey, and Torrey is severely missed in that group. So I still think they really need help both at the defense position and at forward. At defense, it's someone that can kind of fill in, right behind McAvoy and Grzelcyk and be that reliable two-way defenseman. A lot of people were talking about Ekholm in Nashville, but now Nashville's contending for a playoff spot, so who knows what they'll do. But up front, they need help too as well, just to find ways to score more goals. You can't be a one-line team and get into the playoffs, let alone compete in the playoffs. And this is a team that has a closing championship window. Patrice Bergeron's not getting any younger, as we know, and so they have to be all in, I think, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree 100%. They got to catch Pittsburgh, New York, and Washington, or compete with them if they do get into the playoffs. And my Rangers are coming at their heels right now. So I would think Boston needs to add something at the deadline. It's funny that we're saying they need to add a defenseman after losing Krug and Chara, but maybe that's a direction that they go. Philly, I don't know where they stand as far as their roster. If they can't be too pleased with how the season kind of took a 180 on them. Maybe they try to solidify the back end. It's funny how everybody's looking for, this team just needs a top four defenseman. I mean, every team in the league wants a top four defenseman. I think that's why Ekholm's name was so popular a couple weeks ago. And who knows, maybe that's why the Nashville Predators started playing better and kind of woken up a little bit here in the last few weeks, because they heard all these teams around the league picking and choosing who they were going to get at the deadline. So trade deadline is not always the most fun time of year for players. I didn't really like it. I was glad when it was over and I could focus on the stretch drive, whether it was trying to get in the playoffs or trying to gear up for a big playoff run. So we'll see how it all plays out here with this crazy year that we got going on.
Yeah, along those lines, Sharpie, I know, so many players are thinking about that trade deadline in 1 week, and there's just so many factors to consider. I mean, if you both were playing this season, would you even want to be traded given the circumstances off the ice that are going on?
Yeah, I mean, it depends what team I was on and where I'd be going. At the start of this thing, I would have liked to be traded to an Arizona or a San Jose or an Anaheim. Start the season in January with some sunshine. That would have been nice, but deadline time is a tricky one. If you're getting moved, chances are you're going to a team that has hopes on winning the Stanley Cup or getting into the playoffs, and that's a lot of fun to be a part of. So I'd be excited wherever they ship me.
Yeah, I mean, I think it just entirely depends on the situation. A guy like, Eric Stahl is probably ecstatic to be in Montreal right now, an opportunity to compete in the Stanley Cup playoffs, for who knows, this might be his last chance, right? And he went from a really, really difficult situation in Buffalo. That had to be miserable going through what they went the last few months. So, but then there's other guys that maybe, you look at a guy like Ekholm or something, he's been in Nashville for a long time. He's probably got, good community ties there. His family's, maybe entrenched there, and he doesn't want to move at all. So it's very personal. And then, as you mentioned, KT, all these other kind of outstanding circumstances that are unique to this pandemic environment.
Well, Don, let me ask you for some good stories, because I know you were traded at the deadline. Was it just once were you traded at the deadline?
No, I think twice. One of the stories that comes to mind was pretty funny, actually. I was in Tampa, and we had gotten to the conference finals in 2011. You mentioned the Bruins championship year. We lost in Game 7, 1-0 to them that year in the semifinals. And the next year, we just struggled. We couldn't find our game. And so, as Sharpie said, it becomes a very uneasy time as a player. And especially when you're, my deal was expiring. And so I knew that I was my contract was somewhere that could fit into many teams. And so, I knew that I was likely going to have my name called. And so I was after warmups, actually, we were playing the San Jose Sharks in Tampa. And after warmups, we're getting ready to go out on the ice. And Steve Yzerman, Guy Boucher came in and told me that I had gotten traded. And I had gotten traded to San Jose. And so they were literally down the hall. And so thankfully I didn't play the game, but I did literally walk down the hall in my kind of base layer stuff and go meet the new GM, Doug Wilson, and flew out with them the next day. So it just, things can happen quick.
That exact same thing happened to the Hawks. My first year there in 2006 with Jim Dowd. You remember that old veteran guy, Jim Dowd, that played forever? He was on our team in Chicago. Took morning skate at the United Center. We were playing Colorado that night. He went home to the suburbs to have his nap and his pregame meal, woke up, had been traded to the team we were playing that night, drove back to United Center, went to the visiting locker room and played against us. So that was probably my funniest memory of the deadline deal. That was the year that we were out of the playoffs by Christmas time. We had all these veteran guys, and they all got traded at the deadline, one by one. And we moved like 5 or 6 guys, and we played the game with 10 forwards, and I was getting all kinds of ice time. I thought, this is awesome. Trade deadline's the best. Now I
Great, everybody.